He sits there, a study in solitary gloom, nursing a lukewarm coffee at a corner table in Rosie's diner, the kind of place where the coffee is always brewing and the pie is always homemade. He radiates a chill that has nothing to do with the November wind whipping outside, a tightly coiled energy that makes even Betty, the usually unflappable waitress, give him a wide berth. Sarah, watching from her own small table where she's trying to make a single cup of tea last until her shift starts next door, feels an unexpected pang of empathy. He looks like he's carrying the weight of the world, or at least the weight of a very bad Monday. Before she can talk herself out of it, she catches Betty's eye and discreetly points to the man's table, then mimes paying for his coffee and whatever sad-looking pastry he's been ignoring. Betty raises an eyebrow but nods. Sarah just wants to offer a little warmth, a tiny anonymous kindness in a world that often feels too cold. She has no idea that this particular stranger, with his air of frosty preoccupation, is about to become a very familiar and very complicated figure in her life, specifically Mr. Daniel Evans, the brand new. Much whispered about principal at her son Leo's elementary school. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you believe love should feel like freedom, hit that like button and subscribe. And just like that, a simple anonymous muffin, paid for on a whim, set in motion a chain of events that would turn Sarah Miller's carefully managed, often chaotic, but deeply loved world gently, surprisingly, upside down. The man in the diner had looked like he'd been wrestling a bear and lost. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened as if in surrender, and the suit he wore, though clearly expensive, looked like it had been slept in, or at least endured a very long, very stressful journey. Sarah, a connoisseur of stress herself, recognized the signs. She debated the gesture for a full 3 minutes, her own tight budget flashing like a warning sign in her mind. But the image of his slumped shoulders and the way he stared blankly out the window at the gray street had tipped the scales. She'd added a blueberry muffin to his tab, Rosie's best. He hadn't seen her do it. She'd made sure of that, slipping out of the diner with a quick wave to Betty just as the waitress delivered the unexpected bounty to his table. Sarah had caught a glimpse through the window as she hurried to her job at the community library. The man looked up, startled, then a flicker of confusion, followed by a brief, almost imperceptible nod to Betty. A small, satisfying warmth had spread through Sarah then, a welcome counterpoint to the biting wind. She'd needed that small win. Life as a single mom to her bright, boisterous 10-year-old son, Leo, was a tapestry woven with joy and relentless demands, and small wins were precious currency. She chalked it up to a random act of kindness, a tiny deposit in the universe's goodwill bank, and promptly tried to put the man and his melancholic aura out of her mind. Or so she thought. Her own world was a cozy chaos of school runs, PTA meetings she sometimes dreaded, Leo's ever-evolving passions this week, competitive cup stacking, and the quiet sanctuary of the library where she worked part-time. Leo was her sun, moon, and stars, the reason for every early morning and late night. He was currently a bundle of nerves and excitement about Northwood Elementary. The new principal started today, Mom, he'd announced at breakfast, scattering cereal crumbs with abandon. Jason says he's super tall and doesn't smile. Ever. And Mrs. Davison in 3rd grade heard he's going to make us do extra homework. Sarah had ruffled his hair. Principals always seem a bit serious at first, sweetie. It's a big job. Let's give him a chance before we decide he's a homework assigning giant. But a tiny seed of apprehension had been planted. Leo was a sensitive soul beneath his boisterous exterior. A truly draconian principal could make the 5th grade a miserable experience. Later that day, shelving books in the library's quiet local history section, Sarah had spotted a flyer tacked to the community bulletin board. Meet Northwood Elementary's new principal, Mr. Daniel Evans, it declared, above a slightly blurry, very serious photograph of a man with tired eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. The name didn't ring any bells, and the photo was too indistinct for her to pay much mind. She just hoped, for Leo's sake, that Mr. Evans was more approachable in person than his reputation, or his flyer photo, suggested. She cherished the moments of peace in her life, however fleeting, and the thought of a new source of school-related stress was unwelcome. A week later, Sarah found herself in the brightly lit, cacophonous cafeteria of Northwood Elementary for the mandatory Meet the New Principal night. She was tired after a long day, her mind still half on a grant proposal she was helping an elderly patron with at the library, but she'd promised Leo she'd go. He was at home with a sitter, probably already deep into a new video game, but her presence felt important, a small act of parental solidarity. She was chatting with Mrs. Henderson, mother of Leo's best friend, when a hush fell over the room. The PTA president, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, stepped up to the microphone. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the new principal of Northwood Elementary, Mr. Daniel Evans. A man walked onto the low makeshift stage, adjusting the microphone. He was tall, yes, and his expression was indeed serious as he surveyed the room full of expectant parents. And then he turned slightly, the harsh fluorescent light catching his profile, and Sarah's breath hitched. Her stomach did a queasy little flip. It was him, the man from Rosie's Diner, the recipient of her anonymous blueberry muffin. Mr. Solitary Gloom himself. Oh no, she thought, a flush creeping up her neck. Asterisk go. This is not good. This is prime-level awkward. Star. Daniel Evans began to speak, his voice calm, measured, professional. He talked about his vision for the school, his commitment to the students, his open-door policy. Sarah barely heard a word. She was too busy replaying the diner scene in her head, her casual act of kindness now feeling like a spotlight pointed directly at her. He hadn't looked particularly grateful that day, more bewildered. What if he thought she was some kind of pity provider? What if he recognized her now and thought she was trying to curry favor? Her cheeks burned. As he spoke, his gaze swept the room, professional and impartial. Then, for a fleeting second, his eyes met Sarah's. Just a flicker, a micro-expression of something. Recognition? Surprise? It was gone before she could decipher it, replaced by the same composed, slightly distant demeanor he presented to the rest of the parents. He didn't falter in his speech, didn't give any outward sign that one of the faces in the crowd belonged to the woman who had anonymously bought him breakfast when he looked like he was at his lowest ebb. After the speech, parents began to mingle, some making a beeline for the new principal. Sarah, however, had the opposite instinct. She wanted to melt into the linoleum. She tried to inch towards the exit, hoping to make a quiet escape, but Mrs. Henderson, blissfully unaware of Sarah's internal turmoil, grabbed her arm. Come on, Sarah, let's go say hello. We need to make a good impression. Before Sarah could formulate a polite refusal, they were part of a small cluster of parents near the stage. And then, there he was, face to face with her. Mr. Daniel Evans, principal of Northwood Elementary, looking directly at her. Up close, he looked less forbidding than he had from a distance, or in the diner. Tired? Yes, the lines around his eyes attesting to long hours, but his gaze was direct and surprisingly kind. Mrs., he prompted, his voice the same calm baritone from the stage. Sarah's mind went blank for a mortifying second. Miller, she managed, her voice a little breathless. Sarah Miller. Leo Miller's mom. 5th grade. She cringed internally. Could she sound any more flustered? A pleasure, Ms. Miller, he said, extending a hand. Welcome. His handshake was firm, professional. There was nothing in his eyes, nothing in his tone, to suggest he remembered a thing about a blueberry muffin or a corner table at Rosie's. Or perhaps he was just incredibly good at pretending. She didn't mention the diner. He didn't mention the diner. The unspoken hung in the air between them, thick and awkward, before he turned to greet the next parent. Sarah mumbled a hasty goodbye and practically fled the cafeteria. The days that followed were a masterclass in polite avoidance and excruciatingly awkward encounters. Mr. Evans, Daniel, as she couldn't help but think of him in the privacy of her own mind, was a constant presence at school drop-offs, standing near the main entrance with a welcoming nod for students and a more reserved, professional greeting for parents. Their daily interactions consisted of a brief, "Good morning, Ms. Miller," from him, and an equally brief, "Morning, Principal Evans," from her, usually accompanied by a strained smile on her part and an inscrutable expression on his. Leo, oblivious, would wave cheerfully at his new principal before disappearing into the school building. Sarah would then hurry off to work, replaying the 30-second encounter in her head, wondering if he was laughing internally at her discomfort, or if he truly had no recollection of their first, unofficial meeting. Then came the dreaded phone call. Ms. Miller? This is Principal Evans' office. He'd like to see you regarding Leo. Sarah's heart plummeted. Leo was generally a well-behaved kid, if a bit exuberant. What could he possibly have done to warrant a summons to the principal's office on only his 3rd week? She arrived at the school with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Principal Evans' office was surprisingly sparse, almost monastic. Neat stacks of papers, a single, rather sad-looking plant on the windowsill, and a large, empty desk. He gestured for her to sit, his expression serious. It turned out Leo had been involved in a minor scuffle on the playground over the rules of a fiercely contested game of tag. No punches thrown, just some heated words and a bit of shoving. Daniel, Principal Evans, handled it with calm fairness, listening to Sarah's slightly defensive explanation and then outlining how he'd spoken to both boys. As she was about to leave, feeling a mixture of relief and residual embarrassment, he said, "He's a good kid, Ms. Miller. Spirited." A small, self-deprecating smile touched Sarah's lips. "He gets that from, well, me, I suppose." A ghost of a smile flickered across Daniel Evans' face, making him look younger, less intimidating. "I appreciate you coming in." He paused, as if he wanted to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. The moment passed, and he was Principal Evans again, all professional decorum. Slowly, reluctantly, Sarah began to see glimpses of the man behind the principal's title. There was the PTA meeting that ran late, everyone tired and cranky. Sarah, one of the last to leave, found Daniel tidying up the staff room, stacking leftover cookies. "Long day for you too, huh?" she'd ventured, surprised at her own boldness. He sighed, loosening his tie slightly, a gesture so unexpectedly human it caught her off guard. "New town, new school. It's an adjustment." He looked directly at her then, a hint of weariness in his eyes. "Still trying to find a decent cup of coffee that doesn't taste like burnt regret." Sarah laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised them both. "Tell me about it. I've lived here 10 years, and some days it still feels new. Rosie's Diner down on Main Street has the best coffee. And muffins," she added, then immediately wished the floor would swallow her whole. He looked at her, a strange expression on his face. "Rosie's, you say?" Yeah," she stammered, her cheeks heating. They do a good blueberry." He just nodded slowly. "I'll keep that in mind." A moment of quiet understanding passed between them, a fragile connection forged over hypothetical coffee and very real, remembered muffins. The next day, Leo came home from school, eyes wide. "Mom," Principal Evans asked if you liked muffins. It was weird. He said he heard Rosie's were good. "How does he know you like muffins?" Sarah nearly choked on her tea. "Oh, you know, sweetie, small town. People talk about baked goods." She needed to be more careful. Despite her resolve to maintain a strictly parent-principal relationship, she couldn't help but notice things. The way he patiently knelt to explain something to a tearful first grader who'd lost her lunchbox. The passionate, if slightly awkward, speech he gave at a town meeting advocating for a new crosswalk near the school, a cause Sarah herself had championed. He wasn't just a stern authority figure. He was dedicated, he cared, and he was, she reluctantly admitted to herself, surprisingly thoughtful. Their interactions remained a dance of approach and retreat. They'd have a genuinely warm, easy conversation at the school book fair about their favorite childhood authors, only for him to be impeccably formal and distant the next day when she had a quick question about a permission slip. The emotional whiplash was unsettling. Sarah found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was like when he wasn't Principal Evans, when he wasn't carrying the weight of an entire elementary school on his shoulders. A flutter of something warm and unfamiliar would stir in her chest when he offered one of his rare, genuine smiles, a feeling she immediately, sternly, told herself was inappropriate and ridiculous. The antagonist, in this small-town drama, wasn't a person so much as a pervasive sense of propriety and the fear of gossip. It manifested in Brenda, a particularly nosy PTA mom with a radar for any deviation from the norm. "So, Sarah," Brenda had said, cornering her near the bake sale table, her eyes glinting. "You seem to have Principal Evans' ear more than some. He's quite handsome, isn't he? Though a bit stiff, don't you think?" Sarah had mumbled something noncommittal about him being very professional and made a hasty escape, Brenda's speculative gaze burning into her back. The school's holiday concert was the turning point. Leo had a small, non-speaking part as a reindeer, a role he took with utmost seriousness. Sarah, beaming with pride from the audience, scanned the crowded gymnasium. Her eyes landed on Daniel Evans, standing near the back. He wasn't on official duty, just watching, his expression softer than she usually saw it, a faint smile playing on his lips as a group of kindergartners warbled slightly off-key. Their eyes met across the room, a spark of shared amusement, of connection. Then, a moment later, she saw him in conversation with a polished, attractive woman Sarah vaguely recognized as a school board member. They were laughing, their heads close together. A sharp, unexpected pang. Was it jealousy? Shot through Sarah. Ridiculous. She had no claim on him, no right to feel such a thing. It was a stark reminder of the chasm between their worlds, their roles. He was the principal, an eligible, if reserved, newcomer. She was Leo's mom, a single parent just trying to keep all the balls in the air. It was too complicated, too fraught with potential pitfalls. With a sinking heart, Sarah decided she had to pull back, truly pull back this time. For Leo's sake. For her own peace of mind. She started avoiding any non-essential interaction, sending notes via Leo for routine matters, keeping her good mornings brief and her gaze averted. Daniel noticed the shift. She could feel his eyes on her sometimes during drop-off, a questioning look. He seemed disappointed. Or was she just projecting her own muddled feelings onto him? A week after the holiday concert, Sarah received an email. Not from the school's general account, but directly from Devon's at Northwood. EDU. Subject, meeting request. Her stomach tightened. She clicked it open. Asterisk, Ms. Miller, I'd appreciate it if you could stop by my office at your convenience this week. There's something I'd like to discuss. Daniel Evans. Star. It wasn't about Leo. He usually called for that. This felt different. More personal. More concerning. She found herself in his office the next afternoon, perched awkwardly on the edge of the visitor's chair. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. Ms. Miller. Sarah, he began, his voice quiet, his usual professional armor slightly askew. Thank you for coming. This isn't about Leo. He's doing great, by the way. His enthusiasm for the science fair project is impressive. Sarah managed a weak smile. He's very dedicated to his exploding volcano model. Then, confusion and wary curiosity. Oh. Then, what is this about? Daniel Evans leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his gaze direct and unwavering. It's about the diner. And the muffins. And the fact that I haven't properly thanked you for what was an extraordinary act of kindness on a truly terrible day for me. He paused, a faint flush rising on his neck. And it's also about the fact that this whole situation is incredibly awkward, and I feel like every time I try to navigate it, I just make it worse. Sarah's heart began to pound, a frantic bird against her ribs. She wanted to bolt from the room, but an equally strong, traitorous part of her wanted to stay, to hear what he had to say. Principal Evans. Daniel, she began, her voice softer than she intended. It was just a coffee and a muffin. A random gesture. Honestly, it wasn't random to me, he said, his voice low and earnest. I just moved to town, started this job, found out my apartment wasn't ready, and realized I'd left my wallet 2 states away. That small kindness, it mattered. More than you know. And then to find out you were a parent here. I've been trying to navigate this professionally, to keep a respectful distance, but he hesitated, searching for the words. I enjoy talking to you, Sarah. When we're not both trying so hard to be careful. I enjoy it more than I probably should, given my position. The honesty in his voice disarmed her. It is complicated, she admitted, her gaze dropping to her nervously twisting hands. My main concern is Leo, and your position. I don't want anything to make things difficult for him, or for you at your job. People talk. I know they do, he said with a wry grimace. And I don't want to cause any problems for Leo or for the school. Which is why I wanted to talk. To clear the air. And maybe, he took a breath, maybe to suggest that despite the complications, I'd like to get to know you better, if you were open to it. Outside of these walls, of course. As Daniel, not Principal Evans. And as Sarah, not just Leo's mom. Sarah looked up, meeting his hopeful, anxious gaze. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but his vulnerability had chipped away at her defenses. The pull towards this kind, unexpectedly candid man was undeniable. I need to think about that, Daniel, she whispered. I really do. A week passed, filled with Sarah's internal debate. Hope wrestled with caution. The memory of his earnest face, the open honesty in his eyes, replayed in her mind. Then came Saturday, and the town's annual fall festival. Leo was off with Mrs. Henderson's son, happily engaged in some preteen adventure involving too much cotton candy. Sarah found herself wandering through the craft stalls, the scent of cinnamon and roasting nuts in the air, trying very hard not to think about Daniel Evans and his quietly revolutionary proposition. And then, inevitably, because life has a funny way of orchestrating these things, she bumped into someone, sending a cascade of hand-knitted scarves tumbling from a display. Oh, I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, bending to help gather them. Not a problem at all, a familiar voice said. She looked up. It was Daniel. Not Principal Evans in his stiff suit, but Daniel in faded jeans and a soft, well-worn cable-knit sweater, a light jacket slung over his arm. He looked relaxed, younger, impossibly approachable. "Sarah." He offered a genuine, unguarded smile that made her stomach do a little flip. "Fancy meeting you here." "Daniel." "Hi," she managed, feeling a blush creep up her neck despite the crisp autumn air. "Enjoying the festival?" "Trying to," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Actually, I was hoping I might run into you." "Have you thought about what I said?" They found a slightly quieter spot near the riverbank, away from the main throng, the cheerful noise of the festival a pleasant hum in the background. The late afternoon sun dappled through the turning leaves, painting the scene in hues of gold and amber. Sarah took a deep breath, the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke filling her lungs. "I have. A lot. And honestly, it scares me, Daniel. People will talk. Brenda from the PTA will have a field day. And Leo. I don't want him to be teased, or for things to be awkward for him at school." Daniel nodded, his expression serious but understanding. "I understand all of that. Believe me, I've mentally rehearsed every potential awkward conversation and worst-case scenario. But I've also thought about how rarely you meet someone who makes you feel a little less like you're navigating the world entirely on your own. Or someone who can make you laugh after a particularly challenging week of budget meetings and playground disputes." A small laugh escaped Sarah, despite herself. "I imagine those are pretty rough." "You have no idea," he said, his smile returning. "The point is, Sarah, I'm willing to navigate the talk, the potential awkwardness. We can be discreet, careful. We can take it incredibly slowly. But I don't want to not try simply because of fear. That first day in Rosie's, you showed me unexpected kindness when I was feeling about as low as a person could feel. I'd like the chance to return the favor. Perhaps over dinner? A proper one this time. No anonymity required. My treat, of course." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet strength, the hint of vulnerability that mirrored her own. The fear was still there, a persistent hum beneath the surface, but it was being steadily overshadowed by a different feeling, a warmth, a burgeoning hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time. She thought of Leo, of course, her fiercely protective instincts kicking in. But then, a new thought. Wouldn't a happy, less stressed mom be the best thing for him? Someone who wasn't always looking over her shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She took another deep breath, a decision solidifying in her heart. "People will definitely talk," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. Daniel's smile widened, reaching his eyes and making them sparkle. "Let them. We'll give them something good to talk about. Or, at the very least, something more interesting than the PDA bake sale." A slow, genuine smile spread across Sarah's face, chasing away the last of her reservations. "Okay, Evans. Dinner. But you're definitely buying." "It would be my distinct honor, Miller," he replied, his voice warm with a relief that mirrored her own. They walked together through the festival for a little while longer, a comfortable, easy silence settling between them, punctuated by light conversation about everything and nothing. He bought her a ridiculous, oversized caramel apple, and they shared it, laughing as sticky caramel dripped down their chins. There was a sense of lightness, of new beginnings, that felt as crisp and promising as the autumn air. The following Monday at school drop-off, the customary nod they exchanged was different. Still professional for any watching eyes, but beneath the surface, there was a new warmth, a private understanding, a shared secret that made Sarah's heart lift and her step feel a little lighter. Later that day, Leo came home from school, bouncing with his usual energy. "Principal Evans said hi to you specifically today, Mom." And he smiled. Like a real smile. He usually just nods like a polite robot. Sarah laughed, a rich, happy sound. "Well, maybe he's just having a good day, sweetie." A few days later, Sarah was volunteering in the school library, sorting through a mountain of donated books. She felt a presence beside her and looked up to see Daniel. He was holding out a steaming paper cup. "From the good coffee place downtown," he murmured, his eyes twinkling. "The one that doesn't taste like burnt regret. And I believe I owe you a muffin, too." He produced a blueberry muffin from a small paper bag, identical to the ones from Rosie's. Their fingers brushed as she took the coffee, a jolt of warmth that had nothing to do with the hot drink. He gave her a quick, almost imperceptible wink before turning to greet the librarian. Sarah smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile that reached deep inside her. It was just coffee and a muffin, a simple offering. But this time, it felt like a promise. And so, a simple act of kindness in a diner, meant for a cold stranger, begins to blossom into something warm, hopeful, and wonderfully promising. It's complicated, sure, and the path ahead might have a few bumps, but sometimes the best things in life are worth navigating the complexities for. Thanks for watching. If you believe in second chances and real love, give this story a like and subscribe for more.